Shalom everyone in YouTube land. How's everybody doing? This is not a video for believers trying to keep the Torah. This is a video for believers who claim to keep Torah but try to weasel their way out of keeping certain commands. Even some that are, quote, everlasting throughout your generations commands. This video is for Nazaretians. What in the world is a Nazaretian? A believer I know really well coined this phrase. Nazaretian is this is the definition. A believer that has come to the truth, walking in the Torah, and belief in Messiah Yeshua. You got to have both. Can't have one without the other. It's like peanut butter and jelly, Kool-Aid and sugar. Okay, let me just start over. A believer that has come to the truth of walking in the Torah and belief in Messiah Yeshua, but they still hold on to beliefs they learn in Christianity that are not scriptural. Beliefs they will not let go of. So this video is to hopefully help someone to get some of that old Christian leaven out, some of those bad teachings, unscriptural teachings. We need to pray for our brothers and sisters that are Nazaretians so that they will come into compliance with what the Torah commands and says. Just like we need to pray for everyone else in the faith, like James says in James 5:16. Confess your trespasses to one another and pray for one another so that you are healed. The earnest prayer of a righteous one accomplishes much. During the spring feast, one of the commanded feasts is the Pesach, or the Passover. Observing Passover is very, very important. So important that Yahweh gives you a second opportunity to observe it if you're not able to in the first month. So you get an opportunity in the second month if you weren't able in the first month. He doesn't show that kind of favor for any of the other feasts. That is the only one. So in this video, I'll be addressing some false teachings about Yeshua's observance of Passover and other false teachings regarding the observance of Passover. False teaching numero uno. The accounts of Mark and Luke are obviously flawed because they state that the Passover is killed on unleavened bread. An article entitled, Was the Last Supper the Passover Meal? States the following. Quote, Matthew says it was the first of unleavened bread. On the surface, this appears to contradict John's account, which plainly states that the Last Supper occurred before the feast of Passover. However, Mark and Luke add an additional detail that helps clarify the time. Mark says it was the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover. Luke states it was the day of unleavened bread when the Passover must be killed. End quote. The folks that believe Mark and Luke are flawed look to the Greek to prove that. So, must admit, I'm not a Greek expert. So I will read the verses that the article was referring to in the KJV, since it was translated from Greek. So they say. Matthew 26:17. Now the first day of the feast of unleavened bread, the disciples came to, gotta clean it up, Yeshua, saying unto him, Where wilt thou that we prepare for thee to eat the Passover? Mark 14:12. And the first day of unleavened bread, when they killed the Passover, his disciples said unto him, Where wilt that we go and prepare that thou mayest eat the Passover? Luke 22:7. Then came the day of unleavened bread, when the Passover must be killed. Okay, so we read that was in the KJV. Now let me get my Peshitta. It's right over here, so excuse me for a second. And I'll be reading from the Aramaic English New Testament, which was translated by Andrew Gabriel Ross, which is an awesome version of the Peshitta New Testament. I want to read those 3 verses out of it that I just read out of the King James. So, first one is Matthew 26:17. Bear with me. Now on the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the disciples drew near to Yeshua and said to him, Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Pascha, or Passover. And this is Mark 14:12. And then the first day of the unleavened bread, in which the Yehudim slay the Pascha, his disciples were saying to him, "Where do you desire us to go for you to prepare the Pascha to eat?" And the last one is Luke 22:7. And the day of the feast of unleavened bread arrived, during which there was the custom that the Pascha be slaughtered. So, does the verses in the KJV or the Aramaic Peshitta sound any different? No, they do not. False teaching number 2. The phrase, prepare the Passover, found in Matthew 26:19, Mark 14:16, and Luke 22:13, comes from the Greek phrase. I'm not a Greek dude, so just show me a little mercy with my pronunciations. Hitomisan, to Pascha. According to Strong's Concordance, the root Greek verb hitomazo means 1. To make ready, prepare. 1a. To make the necessary preparations, get everything ready. Drawn from the Oriental custom of sending on before kings on their journeys persons to level the roads and make them passable. End quote. Nazaretians take this to mean that the Passover was prepared but not eaten until after Yahshua died. Let's take a look at what Luke 22:7 says with that in mind. And the day of unleavened bread came when the Passover had to be slaughtered. Here we see the Passover as being killed or slaughtered. Mark 14:12 sounds similar to Luke 22:7, what we just read. And on the first day of unleavened bread, when they were slaughtering the Passover lamb, present tense, his taught ones said to him, "Where do you wish us to go and prepare for you to eat the Passover?" In Luke 22 and Mark 14, they prepared the Passover after they killed it, and then they ate it. Is there anything hard about that? False teaching number 3. Luke 22:16. For I say to you, I shall certainly not eat of it again until it is filled in the reign of Elohim. Some believers will say that the Messiah did not eat Passover because of the verbiage in this verse, because of what it says. See, there's proof he didn't eat the Passover. He just said he wouldn't eat of it until the reign of Elohim. But wait a minute. Don't forget the Passover was sacrificed in verse 7 of that same chapter. Let's read in context starting in verse 16. 16 to 20. Luke 22. For I say to you, I shall certainly not eat of it again until it is filled in the reign of Elohim. And taking the cup, giving thanks, he said, take this and divide it among yourselves. For I say to you, I shall certainly not drink of the fruit of the vine until the reign of Elohim comes. And taking bread, giving thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, this is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Likewise, the cup also after supper, saying, this cup is the renewed covenant in my blood, which is shed for you. What are two key words just read in verse 20? After supper. So, I have to ask the question, was Yahshua on a fast? Did Yahshua partake in the bread, wine, and Passover lamb during supper? He sure did, or he would be sinning. He will be breaking the Torah. Plain and simple. No getting around that. The Passover will not be fulfilled until the reign of Elohim. Yahshua did not fulfill it, therefore he ate of it every year that he was alive. False teaching number 4. Here's another quote from the article I mentioned earlier. Quote, in addition, Deuteronomy 16 verses 2, 5, and 6 shows that the disciples would have also had a problem with where to slay a Passover lamb had they desired to kill one. End quote. So let's take a look at Deuteronomy 16, since Nazaretians love This is their go-to verses, chapter pretty much, for getting out, or in their minds, I guess, their get out of jail free card for not observing Passover. Just as much as they love to go to 1 Corinthians 5:7 to say Yeshua is the Passover. But obviously Paul was speaking figuratively. I'll talk about that one later on, because it needs to be addressed. Deuteronomy 16:2-6. And you shall slaughter the Passover to Yahweh your Elohim from the flock and from the herd, in the place where Yahweh chooses to put his name. Eat no leavened bread with it. For 7 days you eat unleavened bread with it, bread of affliction, because you came out of the land of Mitzrayim in haste, so that you remember the day in which you came out of the land of Mitzrayim all the days of your life. And no leaven should be seen with you in all your border for 7 days. Neither should any of the meat which you slaughter in the evening on the first day stay all until morning. You are not allowed to slaughter the Passover with any of your gates which Yahweh your Elohim gives you. But at the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell, there you shall slaughter the Passover in the evening at the going down of the sun at the appointed time you came out of Mitzrayim. There are two things Nazaretians like to point out from these verses. Number one, you have to kill the Passover where Yahweh makes his name dwell, aka Jerusalem, which I spent a lot of time on putting Yahweh in a box video. Go back and refer to that one. If anybody comes at you with that argument, there's a lot of scriptural evidence to disprove that. And I will show some in this teaching as well. Number two, you are not allowed to slaughter the Passover within any of your gates. So let's go to Ezekiel 11:16-17. Verse 16. Therefore say, thus said the Master Yahweh, although I have sent them far off among the Gentiles, and although I have scattered them among the lands, yet I was for them a set apart place for a little while in the lands to which they came. Therefore say, thus said the Master Yahweh, and I shall gather you from the peoples, and I shall assemble you from the lands where you have been scattered, and I shall give you the land of Yisrael. It says in verse 17, Yahweh will bring back the people to the land of Israel. Will bring back. Emphasis, they're not there at that time. But in verse 16, Yahweh said he was a set apart place for a little while. This was written after the command was given in Deuteronomy 16. So Israel was scattered at this time. They were not in Jerusalem. Does that mean they didn't do the Passover because of what Deuteronomy 16 says? No. Simply because the Passover is to be observed forever, an everlasting covenant, everlasting law throughout your generations, was the idiom for forever. We can see Yahweh's mercy in verse 16. Yahweh knows he gave the command to do unleavened bread, Shavuot and Sukkot, where his name dwells. But he's merciful enough to make a way to still observe his feast outside of Jerusalem. You could do it in Jerusalem, Georgia, or Jerusalem, New Jersey if you want to. I believe we're in the same predicament that Israel was back in Ezekiel chapter 11. Yahweh's name does not dwell in Jerusalem anymore. Jeremiah 7:1-14. The word that came to Yirmiyahu from Yahweh saying, stand in the gate of the house of Yahweh, and you shall proclaim there this word, and shall say, hear the word of Yahweh, all you of Yehudah, who enter in at these gates to bow before Yahweh. Thus said Yahweh of hosts, Elohim of Yisrael, make your ways and your deeds good. Then I'll let you dwell in this place. Do not trust in these false words, saying, this is the Hekel of Yahweh, the Hekel of Yahweh, the Hekel of Yahweh. For if you truly make your ways and your deeds good, if you truly do right ruling between a man and his neighbor, if you do not oppress the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, and do not shed innocent blood in this place, or walk after other mighty ones to your own evil, Then I shall let you dwell in this place, in the land that I gave you to your fathers forever and ever. See, you are trusting in false words which do not profit, stealing, murdering, committing adultery, swearing falsely, burning incense to Baal, and walking after other mighty ones you have not known. And you came and stood before me in this house, which is called by my name, and said, We have been delivered in order to do all these abominations. Whew, it's pretty stout. Has this house, which is called by my name, become a den of robbers in your eyes? Look, I myself have seen it, declares Yahweh. But go now to my place at Shiloh, where I set my name at the first, and see what I did to it because of all the evil of my people Yisrael, because of disobedience. And now, because you have done all these works, declares Yahweh, I spoke to you, rising up early and speaking, but you did not hear, and I called you, but you did not answer. I shall also do to this house, which is called by my name, in which you trust, and to this place which I give to you and your fathers, as I did to Shiloh. Because of disobedience, Yahweh took his name from Shiloh and Jerusalem. Yahweh's name does not dwell in Jerusalem anymore. Am I saying to completely overlook Deuteronomy 16? No. The Passover is a festival forever. Deuteronomy 16 does not change that. Amen? Now that I've showed from Scripture that Yahweh's name does not dwell in Jerusalem anymore, let's look at some verses regarding do not kill it within any of your gates. We can all agree that Yahweh is an Elohim of mercy. Amen? Why would Yahweh give a command in Exodus 12 that is forever, and then later in Deuteronomy 16 make that command that is forever virtually impossible to keep for certain believers because of their geographical location? Let me go ahead and ask that question again. Why would Yahweh give a command in Exodus 12, the original Passover, that is forever, and then later in Deuteronomy 16 make that command that is forever virtually impossible to keep for certain believers because of their geographical location? Is that an Elohim of order or disorder? If that's the case, which it is not. Is that Elohim of mercy? No, it's not. So here are some verses to think about regarding within your gates. I'm going to stay in Deuteronomy 12, just a couple chapters before 16. I'm going to read 5 through, scroll down, 5 through 21. Verse 5. But seek the place which Yahweh, your Elohim, chooses out of all your tribes to put his name there for his dwelling place, and there you shall enter. Here we see some similar language to Deuteronomy 16. Verse 5 is talking about where his name dwells, just like in Deuteronomy 16. Verse 6. And there you shall take your burnt offerings, and your tithes, your contributions of your hand, and your vowed offerings, and your voluntary offerings, and the firstlings of your herd and of your flock. And there you shall eat before Yahweh your Elohim, and shall rejoice in all that you put your hand to, you and your households, in which Yahweh your Elohim has blessed you. Do not do as we are doing here today, each one doing whatever is right in his own eyes, because you have not entered the rest and the inheritance which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you. But you shall pass over the Jordan, and shall dwell in the land which Yahweh your Elohim is giving you to inherit. And he shall give you rest from all your enemies round about, and you shall dwell in safety. We put emphasis on this next verse. And it shall be that unto the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell there, there you are to bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings, and your offerings, and your tithes, and the contributions of your hand, and all your choice offerings which you vow to Yahweh. Your tithes. Verse 12. And you shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim, you and your sons and your daughters, and your male servants and your female servants, and the Levite who's within your gates, since he has no portion nor inheritance with you Guard yourself that you do not offer your burnt offerings in every place that you see, except in the place which Yahweh chooses in one of your tribes. There you are to offer burnt offerings, and there you are to do all that I command you. Only whatever your being desires you slaughter and eat, according to the blessings of Yahweh your Elohim, which he has given you within all your gates. The unclean and the clean do eat of it, of the gazelle and the deer of Lite. Only the blood you do not eat. Pour it on the earth like water. You are not allowed to eat within your gates the tithe of your grain, or of your new wine, or of your oil, or the firstlings of your herd or your flock, or any of your offerings which you vow, or your voluntary offerings, or the contribution of your hand. But eat them before Yahweh your Elohim in the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses. You and your son and your daughter, your male servant, your female servant, the Levite who is within your gates, and you shall rejoice before Yahweh your Elohim in all that you put your hands to. Guard yourself that you do not forsake the Levite as long as you live in your land. When Yahweh your Elohim enlarges your border as he has promised you, and you say, let me eat meat, because you long to eat meat, you eat as much meat as your being desires. Here we go. Here's a key verse, 21. When the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to put his name is too far from you, then you shall slaughter from your herd and from your flock, which Yahweh has given you, as I have commanded you. Watch this last sentence. And you shall eat within your gates as much as your being desires. Here we can see Yahweh's mercy for those that were not able to make it to where his name dwells. First Yahweh says to not eat within your gates. But later he says to eat within your gates. What's up with that? It's because he allowed the children of Israel that could not make it to where his name dwells to eat within their gates. False teaching number 5. Yeshua was eating artos instead of azumos during Passover. So the Last Supper could not have been Passover. Artos is a Greek word for leavened bread, and azumos is unleavened bread. Luke 23:38. And there was also an inscription written over him in the letters of Greek and Roman and Hebrew, this is the sovereign of the Yehudim. This is the Messiah's death. We can all agree on that. So let's read verses 54 through 56 in the same chapter. Luke 23. And it was preparation day, and the Sabbath was approaching. The women who had come with him from Galilee, following after, and saw the tomb and how his body was laid. And having returned, they prepared spices and perfumes, and they rested on the Sabbath according to the command. The Sabbath mentioned here in verse 56 is the high day of the first day of unleavened bread, not the weekly Sabbath. So we can see that unleavened bread has just begun. Next chapter, verses 30 and 35. And it came to be, when he sat at the table with them, having taken the bread, he blessed, and having broken, he was giving it to them. Verse 35. And they related what took place on the way, and how he was recognized by them in the breaking of the bread. And the word here, in those two verses, is artos. So clearly, these two verses are during unleavened bread. But they have artos in them instead of azumos. So was this not unleavened bread because they were eating artos? No. So the argument that Yeshua did not eat Passover because the word artos appears during the Last Supper is wrong. Here are a few questions to ask Nazaretians about Passover. Can you show me one example in the entire scriptures where Passover was observed without a lamb? No. Can you show me one example in scripture where Passover was observed with just bread and wine? or a leg of lamb bought at your local grocery store. No. Does forever mean forever? The word forever appears 3 different times in the original Passover in Exodus chapter 12. The words an everlasting law appears twice in the original Exodus account. Throughout your generations appears once. These 3 pretty much are synonymous. Is it logical to look past the words forever and everlasting law throughout your generations when you get to Deuteronomy 16? Do you just throw all that out when you get Deuteronomy 16? The word forever appears 56 times in the Torah. I believe that's with the ISR translation. Are we going to overlook all of those when it is not convenient and it doesn't fit our theological paradigm? Does the phrase, where he makes his name to dwell, or do not kill it within any of your gates, do away with the word forever and supersede it? One Torah command does not do away with another Torah command. The commands build upon each other, like bricks when you build a house. One does not do away with the other. All right, here we go. Number 6. False teaching number 6. Yahshua is the Passover. This is a big one. That's why I waited till later on. So, let's read a couple verses out of the original Exodus story. Exodus 12, 26, and 27. Verse 26. And it shall be, when your children say to you, what does this service mean to you? Then you shall say, it is the Passover slaughtering of Yahweh, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Mitzrayim, when he smote the Mitzrites and delivered our households. And the people bowed their heads and did obeisance. If we teach anything other than what these verses say, we are adding and taking away from the Torah. So, with that in mind, let's go to 1 Corinthians 5:7 and read it out of context by itself to begin with. Therefore, cleanse out the old leaven, so that you are a new lump, as you are unleavened. For also Messiah, our Passover, was offered for us. There you go. Bam! We don't have to keep Passover. The Messiah is a Passover. All right, let's go home. Okay. Let's go. Let's dig a little deeper. This one verse trips up so many when it comes to observing Passover. I want to read it in context, starting in verse 1, to see what kind of issues Paul's dealing with, because pretty much both books of Corinthians, he's just giving the Corinthians a butt whooping with his words. Verse 1. It is commonly reported that there is whoring among you, and such whoring as is not even named among the Gentiles, so as one to have his father's wife. And you have been puffed up, and did not rather mourn, so that he who has done this deed be removed from among you. So here, from the first 2 verses, we see that Paul is dealing with sexual immorality, or whoring, and pride. Okay? So nothing about Passover yet, so let's keep reading. Verse 3. For I indeed, as absent in body, but present in spirit, have already judged the one who did this, as I thought I were present. In the name of our Master, Yahshua Messiah, when you are gathered together in my spirit with the power of our Master, Yahshua Messiah, deliver such a one to Satan for destruction of the flesh, in order that his spirit be saved in the day of the Master Yahshua. Your boasting is not good. Do you know that a little leaven leavens the entire lump? He's addressing pride again. People getting puffed up, getting prideful. Here we go, verse 7. Therefore cleanse out the old leaven, so that you are a new lump, as you are unleavened. For also Messiah our Passover was offered for us. Verse 8. So then let us observe the festival. That's interesting. Not with old leaven, nor with the leaven of evil and wickedness, but with the unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. I write to you in my letter not to keep company with those who whore. Talking about whoring again. A couple verses after 7. Verse 10. And I certainly did not mean with those of this world who whore, and again, or greedy with gain, or swindlers, or idolaters, since then you would need to go out to the world. So in verse 8, Paul says to observe the festival. How can we say in one verse, Messiah is a Passover, so we don't have to do the festival, and then the next verse, if you're reading in context, the writer of this says to observe the festival. And clearly, verses 7 and 8 are figurative. Minus the fact that he says, observe the festival. But when he's talking about leaven, it's clearly figurative. You can't go to your local grocery store and buy unleavened bread of sincerity and truth. That statement is just as figurative as much as, for also Messiah our Passover was offered for us. You show me a person that's a leaven lump. We have to admit that a lot of this around verse 7 is figurative, including stuff in verse 7. So hopefully that helps. So we see what Paul thought about the Messiah. Let's see what the Messiah called himself. If Yeshua truly was the Passover, wouldn't he call himself that? Wouldn't he refer to himself as a lamb? That's a legitimate question, right? So let's go to John chapter 6, verses 32 through 35. Therefore Yeshua said to them, truly, truly, I say to you, Moshe did not give you the bread out of the heaven, but my Father gives you the true bread out of the heaven. For the bread of Elohim is he who comes down out of the heaven and gives life to the world. So they said to him, Master, give us this bread always. And Yeshua said to him, Yeshua said to them, I am the bread of life. He who comes to me shall not get hungry at all, and he who believes in me shall not get thirsty at all. Yeshua never anywhere in the New Testament writings referred to himself as the Passover or a lamb. He refers to himself as bread, not a lamb. If Yeshua was the Passover lamb, why didn't he take that great opportunity during the Last Supper to call himself the Passover while they were eating the Passover meal? He missed a golden opportunity. If Yeshua truly was the Passover, where is the second witness besides 1 Corinthians 5:7? Because that's not really a witness at all, since that's figurative language, not literal. One big misconception about Passover is that it is a sin sacrifice. Since people spend so much time trying to type Yeshua to the Passover, but Passover is not a sin sacrifice. The word sin and Passover both appear in only one verse in the entire scriptures, and that's in Numbers 9:13. Here we go. But the man who is clean and is not on a journey and has failed to perform the Passover, that same being shall be cut off from among his people, because he did not bring the offering of Yahweh at its appointed time. That man bears his sin. This verse is saying that not performing the Passover is sin. It's a sin sacrifice. It says nothing about Passover being a sin sacrifice. Why is Yeshua so much typed to the Passover if the Passover is not a sin sacrifice? Doesn't make a lot of sense, at least to me. Yeshua's death was for sin, but the Passover is not. Since I read the verse talking about being cut off for not observing Passover, I want to discuss being cut off for a little bit. So we're going to go to Torah and read about that. Leviticus 23:28 29. And you do not work on that same day, for it is the day of atonement, to make atonement for you before Yahweh your Elohim. For any being who is not afflicted on that same day, he shall be cut off from his people. Exodus 12:15. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. Indeed, on the first day you cause leaven to cease from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the seventh day, that being shall be cut off from Yisrael. Here we have Day of Atonement and unleavened bread, which, if not observed correctly, are cut off offenses. Why do believers observe these two feast days to a T with what Yahweh commands in the Torah, but don't observe Passover according to what Yahweh commands in the Torah? Can anyone explain that to me? Because no comprende. How about Sabbath? Weekly Sabbath. Exodus 31:14, one verse. You shall guard the Sabbath, for it is set apart to you. Everyone who profanes it shall certainly be put to death. For anyone who does work on it, that being shall be cut off from among his people. There are some Sabbath keepers that are more conservative in their observance of Sabbath than others, but a good number of Sabbath keepers take Sabbath serious enough to keep it set apart to Yahweh. Why do some Sabbath keepers observe Sabbath, which is a cut-off offense if broken, but don't observe Passover according to what the Torah commands? No comprende, amigo, or amiga. Our Creator, Yahweh, takes being cut off very seriously. That's why He gives us a second opportunity to observe Passover if we're on a journey or unclean. He doesn't do that for any of the other feasts. He gives us a second opportunity to observe Passover so we don't get cut off. He doesn't want us to be cut off. He wants obedience. He always wants obedience. So I'm going to go a little ADD for the rest of the video. I'm going to introduce something that a lot of people maybe have not heard of or considered before. It might be a bit of a shock. I think this is a revelation that Father gave me, an aha moment, if you will. If I'm in error on this, please, somebody show me and call me out. But I think there might be something to it. So back to Deuteronomy 16. Shocking. Verse 1. Guard the month of Abib and perform the Passover to Yahweh your Elohim, for in the month of Abib, Yahweh your Elohim brought you out of Mitzrayim by night. I believe this verse, up to verse 7, is not even talking about Passover at all. What? Matt, why would you even say something crazy like that? The verse says Passover. Can't you read? Let's keep reading. Verse 2. And you shall slaughter the Passover to Yahweh your Elohim from the flock and the herd in the place where Yahweh chooses to put His name. This verse reads a little different than the original account in Exodus 12. Keep your hand here, Deuteronomy 16. And let's go to the original Passover. We'll read 3 verses, 3 through 5. Speak to all the congregation of Israel, saying, on the 10th day of this month, each of them is to take for himself a lamb, according to the house of his father, a lamb for a household. And if the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the beings. According to each man's need, you make your account for the lamb. Let the lamb be a perfect one, a year old. Take it from the sheep or from the goats. So, one male goat or lamb. Everybody's good with that. Alright, Deuteronomy 16:2. And you shall slaughter the Passover to Yahweh your Elohim from the flock and the herd, in the place where Yahweh chooses to put His name. The herd? What's up with that? So, strong number for herd is H1241. It's bakar. Cattle, herd, oxen, ox, cattle, herd. Head of cattle. Nowhere in Exodus 12 does Yahweh command for a Passover cow. So here's one indicator that Deuteronomy 16 is talking about more than just Passover. Deuteronomy 16:3-7. Eat no leavened bread with it. For 7 days you eat unleavened bread with it, bread of affliction, because you came out of the land of Mitzrayim in haste, so that you remember the day in which you came out of the land of Mitzrayim all the days of your life. And no leaven should be seen with you in all your border for 7 days. Neither should any of the meat which you slaughter in the evening on the first day all night until morning. You are not allowed to slaughter the Passover within any of your gates, which Yahweh your Elohim gives you, but at the place where Yahweh your Elohim chooses to make his name dwell. There you shall slaughter the Passover in the evening, at the going down of the sun, at the appointed time you came out of Mitzrayim. You shall roast and eat it in the place which Yahweh your Elohim chooses, and in the morning you shall turn and go to your tents. There's a key word in verse 7. It's roast. And the Strong's number for that is H1310, which is bashal. To boil. Cook, bake, roast, ripen, grow ripe. But I'm going to put emphasis on boil. Let's go back to the original Pesach. Exodus 12:9. Do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all with water, but roast it in fire, its head with its legs, and its inward parts. If Deuteronomy 16 is talking about Passover, then why does Yahweh say to roast or boil it? But he said not to boil it in the original Passover in Exodus 12. Let's flip the numbers to help clarify what Deuteronomy 16 is possibly talking about. Numbers 28:17-19. And on the 15th day of this month is a festival. For 7 days unleavened bread is eaten. On the first day is a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work. And you shall bring near an offering made by fire as a burnt offering to Yahweh. 2 young bulls and 1 ram, and 7 lambs, a year old, perfect ones. They are for you. Remember, Deuteronomy 16:2 says from the flock and the herd. Verse 19 covers the flock and herd in Numbers 28. Deuteronomy 16:3 again. Eat no leavened bread with it. For 7 days you eat unleavened bread with it. Bread of affliction. And I ought to point out that bread of affliction right here, this is same verbiage as artos and azumos that I mentioned earlier. So this is an example in the Torah of where that appears. Something similar appears because it's Hebrew. Because you came out of the land of Mitzrayim in haste, so that you remember the day, emphasis on the day, in which you came out of the land of Mitzrayim all the days of your life. Did Moshe and the Israelites come out on the 14th or the 15th? Numbers 30:33. So they departed from Ramesses in the first month on the 15th day of the month, on the morrow of the Passover. The children of Israel went out with boldness before the eyes of all the Mitzrites. The Israelites came out on the 15th. Looks like Deuteronomy 16:3 is referring to the 15th and not the 14th, when the Passover is. Let's read a verse in the New Testament and see if that helps. Back to Luke 22, verse 1. And the festival of unleavened bread drew near, which is called Passover. That verse makes sense in the context of Deuteronomy 16, if Deuteronomy 16 is talking about unleavened bread and not Passover. As the Israelites, we need to strive to keep the Torah. We need to observe Passover according to what is commanded in the Torah, or we will be cut off. Yahweh takes observing his Torah very seriously, and we should too. He also takes being cut off very seriously. We should as well. That's why he gives someone that is unclean on the first go around a second opportunity to observe the Passover, so they won't be cut off. That's mercy, people. That is the only feast day we are given that second opportunity to observe it. We need to follow Yeshua's example and keep Passover. Yeshua kept Passover all his life at the Last Supper, despite what some might teach. Shalom.